Hello, welcome to Only for Your Ears and today's episode 10, the Tinder Box, which I've renamed as The Magic of a Man's Best Friend and His Dogs. The summary will start as usual, highlighting the most important points. Then we'll continue with the critical review on how this story plays in society today, and then we'll take a look at the trigger points that were running through the story that I was affected by. Let's begin. The magic of a man's best friend and his dog. A soldier is returning from the wars one day when he meets a witch. She tells him that she can give him riches if he will do a favor for her. There's a hole at the top of a nearby tree. If the soldier climbs the tree, the witch tells him to slide down inside of the hollow trunk. He will find himself a great hall inside of the tree. 3 doors come off the hall, leading through to 3 chambers containing treasure. I digress. I think the soldier was a little gullible to so easily trust the witch, don't you? Each chamber contains money. The first chamber contains coins, the second contains silver, and of course, the third contains gold. Each chamber, however, is guarded by a dog. With the first chamber, it's guarded by a fairly big dog, the silver one by a bigger dog, and the gold one by a huge monstrosity of a dog. But the witch tells the soldier that she will give him her coloured apron, which he can spread upon the ground. I digress. The witch must want something in return, don't you think? The witch would say the dog will then do him no harm, and he will be able to carry off all the treasure he can hold. The only thing the witch asks from the soldier in return is that while he's down there, he must retrieve an old tinder box, which his grandmother forgot the last time she was down there in the tree. She will she will tie a rope around him so that she can pull him back up out of the tree. I digress. A tinder box? Go inside just for a tinder box and, well, of course, some money, but a tinder box? Really? The soldier agrees, and once lowered down into the tree, sure enough, he finds 3 chambers and confronts the 3 dogs in each pocketing as many copper coins from the first chamber, and as much silver from the second, and gold from the third as he can carry. When he signals to the witch to pull him up, she reminds him about her tinder box, and he confesses he'd forgotten it. Of how conveniently. So he goes and finds it. When he's back out of the tree and standing before the witch, she tells him to hand over the tinder box. But before he does so, he demands to know what she wants with it, and threatens to cut her head off with his sword if she refuses. My word. She says she won't tell him, and true to his word, the soldier cuts her head off. He then continues on his way, no remorse whatsoever, towards town with all his treasure and with the tinderbox. I digress. What a selfish, murderous person. But surely the witch must have known this rogue was a criminal. With his newfound wealth, he turns himself into a fine-looking gentleman wearing the best clothes. And when the soldier hears of a beautiful princess who is kept locked away in a brazen castle, which is made of brass, by her father, the king, because the king had heard a prophecy that his daughter would marry a common soldier. A common soldier, you mean the person that defends a nation and will put his life on the line for you? A common soldier. And there's nothing kings want less than for their daughters to marry ordinary soldiers. I digress. So a person that defends the country isn't good enough for his precious little daughter. The soldier longs to see the princess, but he's told it's no good. Nobody can see her. The soldier becomes well liked about town, not least because he gives a fair amount of his money away. I digress here. I'm glad he was magnanimous, generous with his new wealth. Unfortunately, he keeps spending, and because he has no job, he is eventually penniless again. Well, what do you expect? Living in rags and in a squalid digs. He has nothing but the tinder box he had fetched for the witch. I digress. Well, what did he expect? You can't keep spending and spending without a job or without community resources. But maybe the tinder box is the magic gem. Who knows? He strikes a match to light the tinder box so he can look around his room when lo and behold, the dog from the first chamber in the tree appears before him. Told you, magic. When the dog asks the soldier, how can he be of service? The soldier demands some money, and the dog quickly vanishes, only to return shortly after with a bag of copper coins. Can you believe this? The soldier soon learns that if he strikes the tinderbox, this first dog will appear. If he strikes it twice, the dog from the second chamber with silver coins will appear, and three times will summon the large dog from the gold chamber. In no time at all, he's living back in the grand hotel where he was living before he lost all his money. I wonder if he learned any lessons. I doubt it. With all his fine clothes again. But what he wonders if I requested something other than money from the dog. I digress. So the dogs recognize the soldier as their master now. And the dogs show their loyalty in response. He tries his luck, requesting to see the beautiful princess locked away in a brazen castle. The dog disappears and returns with the princess on his back. The soldier is so awestruck by her beauty that he kisses her before the dog return her to the castle. I digress, people. Come on. Of course he falls madly in love with the princess. She's beautiful. And have you ever seen an ugly princess? The next day, the princess tells the king and queen about the dream she had, in which she rode on a dog's back and a soldier kissed her. The king isn't happy about this, so he tells one of the waiting women to watch over the princess the next night. I digress. Of course, the king isn't happy about her dream where she kisses the soldier. This is total juxtaposed to his preconceived idea what soldiers represent to him. When the soldier summons the dog with the tinderbox that night and asks to see the princess again, the waiting woman observes the dog come and take the princess out of her bed, and she follows them both to the soldier's room. The woman is cunning and marks the door of the house with a big cross so she can remember where it is. I digress. Talk about getting mileage out of the dog. However, The dog is equally clever, and when he sees the cross on the door, he duly marks all the doors in the neighborhood so the woman won't know which house is the soldier's. Sure enough, when the woman leads the king and queen to the soldier's hotel the next morning so they can arrest the man who had carried off their daughter, they can't find the house. The queen is a match for the dog, through though in terms of her quick thinking. I digress. They're both as cunning as a fox. The woman and the dog are close to outwitting each other. She gets a small bag and fills it with flour and then ties this around the princess's neck, cutting a small hole into the bag so that when the princess moves, flour will fall to the ground wherever the princess goes. The following night, when the soldier once again tells the dog to bring the princess to him, he is found out, and the next morning he's arrested and thrown into jail. But of course, he is to be hanged the next morning. Hanged. I digress. No trial, just an execution. And what's more, he's left his tinderbox back in the hotel room, but he pays a boy passing his cell to go to the hotel and get the tinderbox for him. He's a lucky man. The boy does so, passing it through the grated window of the soldier's prison cell. When the time comes for the soldier to be hanged, he requests one last wish, which is to be granted: the right to one last smoke before he's executed. One last smoke. I digress. This is why he murdered the witch, the ultimate power. He wanted the ultimate power and control over the tinderbox and its magic. Taking out the tinderbox, he strikes it 3 times, and all the 3 dogs appear. He calls upon them to save his life, and the dogs fall upon the judge and then king and queen, throwing them into the air until they are dashed to pieces. My word. What a good friend. A saving grace. The crowd who has gathered to watch the execution are terrified by the dogs. They tell the soldier to be their king. They don't ask, they tell him it's a command. Now the old one is dead. He agrees. The princess is liberated from the castle and marries the soldier. And the dogs live with them, acting in what has to be the strangest military coup of the literature world. I'd say these people are so afraid of the dogs and what happened to the king, they decided to grant the opportunistic murderer and soldier the ultimate power that he was craving for, and the social status, of course. What an interesting story. And now for my critical review. Let's begin. She says she won't tell him, and true to his word, the soldier cuts off her head. He then continues on his way towards town with all his treasure and with the tiny tinderbox. I digress. What a selfish, murderous person. But surely the witch must have known this rogue was a criminal. A lot of military people are criminals, unfortunately, because they've been forced to do things outside of the law. This is unfortunately a fact of life, people. This reminds me of Bridget Jones when Hugh Grant's character is a total user, unscrupulous, and opportunistic bastard. Woody Allen's Match Point is incredible. And then the talented Mr. Ripley. What do these films have in common? All three of these men are social climbers and will do anything, I mean, literally anything, to climb the ladder to acquire a social, a sense of a high social class. So let's continue. They're all men that desperately want to climb the social or professional ladder to assume the ultimate power. They use their social skills, luck, egregiousness, fearlessness, ruthlessness, and cunning skills to outwit people with charm and lies. Take Bridget Jones, for example. Hugh Grant's character was nothing but a social climber who didn't care who he slept with as long as he was to elevate himself just for his own shallow, ego-driven self. Well, she ends up being really played by him and really, really hurt. But at the end of the film, she ends up with a really good man. But at the beginning, she's played. She's just played by an ego-driven, ruthless man. All he wants is social accum because he feels inferior if he's not up there with the top 5%. Okay, the next one. I digress, of course. He falls madly in love with the princess. She's beautiful. And have you ever seen an ugly princess? Okay, this reminds me of the film Match Point. I can't remember all the other actors in Match Point. It's a Woody Allen film, and the very sultry, sensuous looking, I think her name is Scarlett Johansson, plays the protagonist. Match Point is an incredibly riveting drama about a tennis coach. Rhys Meyers' character marries into a wealthy family, but his social position is threatened by his affair with his brother-in-law's girlfriend. She was too beautiful to resist. Of course, he's going to fall in love with her, an American actress living in London, played by Scarlett Johansson, who is incredibly sensual and beautiful. The film deals with the themes of morality and greed and explores the roles of lust, money, and luck, calling luck as the most important ingredient. And I think the soldier in the story felt very lucky when this supposed witch, well, she was a witch, turns around and says, "You can have all the money in the world as long as you return my Tinder box." And then he kills her, of course. The film deals with all these different themes, including luck and life. He's so threatened by the fear of getting demoted by his social standard if word gets out about his relationship that he plans a way to break into the apartment building and shoots Scarlett Johansson's character to death. Now, in actual fact, he really loved Scarlett Johansson's character, but he was so afraid of losing the status. It was all about his status. It was all about how he looked into society. It doesn't matter that the person had content. It doesn't matter that he really loved this woman. It doesn't matter about anything else except the money and the status. And these people, I'm sorry to say, are just shallow, and they usually aren't happy. And then, unfortunately, sometimes in these situations, these people that play these games play Russian roulette with other people's feelings, sometimes get caught in their own feelings. And then that's a big problem. Okay, so the next one is, it's 1956 in New York, and the film is The Talented Mr. Ripley. This was another phenomenal drama about somebody, a young man, desperate again, just like the soldier in today's story, desperate to have a social status, a high social status, not just any social status. In 1956 New York City, Tom Ripley is approached by a shipping magnate, Herbert Greenleaf, who believes that Ripley attended Princeton with his son. Well, he'd believe anything because he was so desperate to get his son back. Ricky, his name is, because Ripley wears a borrowed Princeton jacket. A borrowed Princeton jacket. This man isn't wealthy. He doesn't come from a wealthy family, but he just knows he's street smart and he knows how to play the game. Greenleaf pays Ripley to travel to Italy, Rome in actual fact, where Dickie has settled, to persuade him to return to the United States. And his son is played by the delicious looking Jude Lord. Okay. After a first class voyage above the RMS Queen Mary, Ripley pretends to be Dickie in the Italian ocean liner terminal and befriends an American socialite, Meredith Lug. And Meredith Lug is played by the fabulous actress or actor now, Kate Blanchett. She's absolutely incredible. Well, what happens? He meets the son. He pretends that he's Dickie. The son doesn't recognize him. And he says, I don't recognize you. Anyway, he he becomes part of the Rat Pack, the trendy pack, and he's having a wonderful time, wonderful social life. And then he meets Philip Hoffman's character, who's very good friends with the son, and the son's girlfriend, Gwyneth Paltrow, and they're very good friends. And he sees through this Dickie character. He knows that he's just a social climber, but he's very quick on his feet and he's very street smart. And they instantly dislike each other. But he fits into the group and he gets by very well until one day Philip Hoffman's character sees him posing, dancing, and trying to be just like Jude Lord's character, the son. And Mr. Ripley catches him looking at him, and then he goes and tells the son, like, he's basically, he's gay, and he's trying uh, to copy you in some way. And this sends Mr. Ripley into a tailspin, the Dickie character. So something happens, and he's really afraid because he knows that Philip Hoffman's character can see through him and can see that he's a total phony. So he becomes desperate. So the Greenleaf's son goes out on a boat with him, and he says, I don't believe who you are. I don't believe that you're this Dickie. I don't believe that you came to school with me. And of course, Mr. Ripley, this Dickie character, who's pretended to be Dickie, goes crazy, and he hits him with the oar of the boat, and he kills him, and he goes to the bottom of the sea and everything. So the guy, Philip Hoffman's character, suspects that something terrible has happened. Anyway, he goes to Philip Hoffman's house, and he says, let's go out for a drink and let's see if we can, find this guy that he killed. And he mocks him and he plays with him and he teases him. And of course, Dickie, pretended to be Dickie, goes crazy and gets the top of this sculpture and bludgeons him with it. and he drops him off at some port. Well, he's just running, running, running. So his plan to play Dickie and to be part of this social climbing group is going by the wayside. So he meets a man, an English guy, that he absolutely falls in love with. I mean, he really, really loves him. Playing Russian roulette. This man is playing Russian roulette. He's trying to be so many different people just so he can stay in this group. And at the same time, he's not out of the closet about his homosexuality. And then he's with this man and he absolutely loves him. And he gets stuck because he's on board the ship and he's coming back to the United States with this man that he absolutely loved to tell the father that his son's dead. And while he's on the ship, he sees Meredith Logue, who's played by Kate Blanchett, and he says, "Oh my God, if she sees me, she will call me Dickie, and my boyfriend will know that I'm a total fraud." So he gets desperate again because he's so desperate to keep this cover up. He's so desperate to play to be this social in this social class that he goes back and he murders the only person that he truly loves. So he continues being this Dickie for the father and tells him that his son's dead. But it's really it's total craziness and desperation. Now let's take a look at the triggers. So the dogs recognize the soldier as their master now, and the dogs show their loyalty in response. He tries his luck, requesting to see the beautiful princess locked away in the castle. Loyalty and support are the signs of unconditional love, in a way. And this is why a man's best friend is or are his dogs, because dogs are the most loyal, I would say, on the planet. Dogs and cats, but mainly dogs. And this was a trigger for me, that the loyalty, the support, the steadfastness, the commitment, no matter what, we will stand by you. We've got your back. We're covered. You're covered. Now, for me, this is so important because most of my life, in fact, all of my life, I have been betrayed. I've experienced very little support. I've supported myself, basically, and just no real sense of loyalty. So, through connected with my wounded inner child, which I spoke about last week, for the most of my life, my mini me has carried the heavy load, which was too much for her to bear, too much for a small child to bear. When it came to emotional self-care, I abandoned my inner child, just like I was abandoned by my mother. I executed harsh, negative self-talk that was projected onto me by my mother. Therefore, I used my mini me as a toxic waste dump, which exacerbated her inner wounds. However, I realized that my mini me knew that I was too busy to be a mother, too busy being a mother to my mother, and I exhausted all my resources to look after my inner child. I never protected her, and she never felt safe. She never, ever really felt safe. Upon reflection, I now realize every time I moved to another country, it had something to do with not feeling secure, injustice, and no sense of support. I have spent my whole life trying to fit in since I was a black sheep in my family, just like the soldier felt. actually in society. In a way, the soldier wants to fit in after returning from the war. Most veterans feel isolated after long times of engagement. And something came to mind. What if I don't have to fit in, but just belong? Trying to fill the hole my whole life by forsaking who I am as a person so I would be a clone for other people. It never, ever worked. They saw I wasn't real, and I knew that I wasn't being real. So I finally realized that this whole need, this whole thirst, this whole hunger to fit in was never going to work. And that sense of not fitting in made me feel, pardon me, made me feel insecure and safe. Hence the traveling around the world, very much like the film Up in the Air. I've now realized that, and I've started to nurture that inner child. And I told her, I will never, ever, ever betray you, and I will always be loyal to you the way that you've always been loyal to me. And I didn't deserve it. I'm now learning to be a mother to her, the mother that she's always deserved. And the relationship that I have with my inner child is so precious and so important to me. It's probably the most important relationship I will ever have in my life. So those triggers, the things that triggered me, are dissolving and going away. Number two, I digress. Talk about getting mileage out of the dog. Okay, this is another situation. My cat died, and my mother lied about why we had to abandon my dog after 7 years. I felt so hurt. I had a cat for 20 years and 2 months. Her name was Jade. She was like my child. She was always there, and she always protected me. And when she died, I felt enormously insecure. And I have to say that when you have a dog, or when you have dog or cats or domestic animals, there's a sense of loyalty that you have, and it's part of being a part of a family that I don't even think you can get with your friends, and sometimes with your husband or your wife. And when she died, and then when I was evicted a month after from my apartment because of the pandemic, again, I felt this overwhelming sense of insecurity, not safe, and I fled the country. Mind you, I'd been there for 22 years, so it wasn't like, but there was the same sense of desperation. The last one, which I'm still, the second follow up to the first part of the trigger. Getting in touch with that inner child, trying to feel safe and secure. The last one, this is why he murdered the witch. He wanted ultimate power and control over the tinderbox and its magic. Taking out the tinderbox, he strikes it 3 times, and all 3 dogs appear like loyal soldiers. Okay, so he got everything that he wanted. He got all the power, and he's got all the social graces, all the social trimmings. But I wonder, even with the beautiful princess, will he ever really feel secure within himself? I wonder about that. I really wonder about that. You know, I'm working class, says Michelle Obama working class. And I never felt as though I had to pretend otherwise. And I'll tell you a very short story. When I was really, really young, a distinguished white man came to the restaurant where my mother and I were sitting eating, and he was so taken by me, apparently taken by me. My mother mentioned this 30 years later. She said, he really liked you. And I thought he really liked my mother. And he really liked me. And what happened? He turned around and he ended up paying for our meal. Surprise, surprise. But I never felt like I was poor black trash. And I think it's because I don't know what it was. I must have felt that no, it doesn't matter about your status. Society worries about your status, but I didn't worry about my status because I think underneath I knew where I belonged and I didn't really care. And so the whole thing about status, it's just a is let me tell you something, people. If you know who you are and if you're true to yourself, it doesn't matter what class you come from. It really, really doesn't. So now we have to end today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And please leave a comment or a thumbs up or even subscribe. It helps with the algorithms and it helps to support the channel. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. And I just want to leave with healing is a lifelong gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Healing is a lifelong gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. We never stop healing. And that's the greatest gift of all. We never stop healing. Bye bye. See you next week.